a homeless man. This unconventional approach would allow him to experience firsthand the real customer service at his restaurant, unvarnished by his celebrity status. The next morning, before the city stirred to life, Shaq embarked on his unusual mission. He put on ragged, ill-fitting clothes, deliberately smudged his face with dirt, and let his hair fall disheveled. He even created a subtle limp, hoping to appear as inconspicuous and vulnerable as possible. His towering frame, usually a beacon of recognition, was now intended to blend into the shadows. His luxury car was parked blocks away, and he walked the rest of the distance, feeling the biting morning chill and the unfamiliar weight of anonymity. As he approached the big chicken restaurant, the familiar aroma of fried chicken wafted towards him, but today, it seemed to carry a different, more unsettling note. He positioned himself near the entrance, a worn blanket wrapped around him, observing the morning rush. Employees bustled in and out, some laughing and chatting amongst themselves, others with their faces glued to their phones. Shaq noticed a distinct lack of eye contact with anyone outside their immediate circle. Regular customers, mostly office workers grabbing breakfast, were served quickly, their orders taken with brisk efficiency but little warmth. There were no genuine smiles, no polite inquiries beyond the transactional minimum. The Big Heart slogan seemed to hang ironically above the hurried counter. After a while, feeling a growing gnawing in his stomach, Shaq decided it was time to put the service to the ultimate test. He slowly shuffled towards the entrance, his eyes downcast, and tentatively pushed open the door. The chime above the door announced his arrival, but no one looked up immediately. He stood just inside, trying to appear hesitant and meek. When a young cashier finally noticed him, her eyes scanned him from head to toe with a look of undisguised distaste. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice flat and devoid of any welcoming tone. Shaq, maintaining his character, mumbled, Just wondering if there's any food, any leftovers, perhaps?" His voice was raspy, deliberately unpolished. The cashier's eyes narrowed. "Sir, we don't give out free food here. This is a restaurant." Her tone was sharp, her body language conveying a clear message of dismissal. Another employee, a man wiping down tables, glanced over, scoffed quietly, and turned his back. There was no offer of help, no hint of compassion, no attempt to understand, just cold, stark rejection. Shaq slowly backed out of the restaurant, the cashier already turning her attention to the next customer. Outside, the morning air felt colder, and the once familiar aroma of chicken now seemed tainted. The harsh truth had slammed into him like a physical blow. The indifference, the blatant disregard for someone perceived as less fortunate, the complete absence of the big heart he had envisioned. It was all there, undeniable and raw. His own employees, the very people he trusted to embody his brand's values, had failed to extend even basic human kindness. The experience left Shaquille O'Neal stunned, but amidst the shock, a fierce determination began to ignite within him. This was a problem he would not, could not, ignore. Homeless man, one of the most overlooked and ignored figures in society, to see how his employees treated regular customers or even those deemed less important. That evening, Shaq stood before a mirror. At over 7 feet tall, with a globally recognizable appearance, he knew blending in wouldn't be easy, but he was undeterred. He pulled out an old, tattered jacket he hadn't worn in years, pairing it with ripped, worn-out jeans and faded sneakers. He added a frayed baseball cap, a pair of sunglasses, and even scooped up some dirt from his backyard to smear on his hands and one side of his face. making himself look like he had just endured a long, harsh day on the streets. Finally, he slung a tattered canvas bag, stuffed with a few odds and ends, a small water bottle, and a sandwich over his shoulder, completing the look of a wandering drifter. Before going to bed, Shaq reflected on the slogan he had chosen for Big Chicken: Big Taste, Big Heart. He wondered if the big heart of the brand still thrived in every location. Would the staff in Phoenix treat every customer with kindness and the big-hearted spirit he had always envisioned? Tomorrow, Shaq would find the answer. The next morning, as sunlight filtered through the window panes, Shaquille O'Neal looked at his reflection. Tall, imposing, and exuding authority, this was the image people often associated with him, someone impossible to ignore. But today, he needed to become someone entirely different. Someone forgotten, invisible in the crowd. A homeless man no one would bother to notice. At 7'1", Shaq knew that blending in entirely would be impossible. After all, he was one of the most recognizable faces in America, but he hoped his humble disguise and demeanor would keep his identity hidden long enough to observe his employees without bias. He didn't want any special treatment. He just wanted to see if they would treat every person who walked through the door with dignity, even someone who appeared to have nothing. A few hours later, Shaq parked his car in an empty lot near the Big Chicken location in Phoenix. Lowering the window, he took a deep breath to steady himself. This wasn't just a routine inspection. To him, this was an opportunity to see if the brand he had poured his heart and soul into truly upheld the values and spirit he envisioned. As Shaq stepped into the restaurant, the soft chime of the doorbell announced his entrance, drawing fleeting glances from a few employees behind the counter. The store looked clean, with the aroma of fried chicken and French fries wafting through the air, but the atmosphere felt lethargic. Customers were lined up at the counter, many looking impatient, while the staff behind the register seemed indifferent. Shaq immediately noticed the crux of the problem. Derek, the cashier at the main register, was the epitome of unprofessionalism and carelessness. Wearing the orange and red Big Chicken uniform, Derek had a lanky frame, unkempt hair, and a vacant expression. He chewed gum absent-mindedly, showing no regard for the customers waiting in front of him. An older woman, likely in her 60s, approached the counter and placed a bag of food down. "Excuse me, but this chicken is burnt. Can I get a replacement?" she asked politely. Derek glanced at her with a detached expression, barely masking his annoyance. "Burnt? Next time, check before you take it," he replied sarcastically. The woman looked taken aback but chose not to argue, quietly walking away. Standing at the back of the line, Shaq witnessed the interaction, and a wave of frustration surged within him. If this is how Derek treats an elderly customer, what will he do with someone like me, who looks like they don't have a dime to their name? He wondered. When it was finally his turn, Shaq stepped up to the counter, offering a faint smile as he said, "Hi, could I get a cup of water, please?" Derek looked up briefly, raising an eyebrow as he scanned Shaq from head to toe. Without bothering to respond verbally, he pointed toward the self-service water station in the corner of the store, then returned his attention to his phone. Shaq thanked him, maintaining his composure, and walked over to the corner, but inside, a storm of thoughts churned. Is this really how my employees treat customers, with such coldness and disrespect? With a cup of water in hand, Shaq chose a small table in a quiet corner of the restaurant and continued to observe. A few more customers had entered the store, but the atmosphere remained unchanged. Derek's indifferent attitude persisted, while the growing line of customers looked increasingly irritated. Suddenly, a young man in the queue raised his voice, saying, "Hey, can you move a little faster? Some of us don't have all day." Derek lazily lifted his gaze, replying with a dismissive tone, "If you don't like it, you're free to go somewhere else." The remark was like fuel on a fire. A few people in the line began shaking their heads in frustration, while others sighed audibly. But what truly worried Shaq wasn't just Derek's behavior. It was the fact that none of the other staff members stepped in to de-escalate the situation or assist. How did someone like Derek end up working here? And why hasn't anyone addressed this problem? Shaq thought. He knew this was just the tip of the iceberg, and that there was much more to uncover about this location's operations. For now, though, he remained seated quietly, watching and formulating his next steps. This was only the beginning of what would be a deep dive into the heart of his business. Shaquille O'Neal sat in a secluded corner of the store, holding a cup of water he had filled from the self-serve station Derek had vaguely gestured toward. The store was busy, but the energy was undeniably negative. Had vaguely gestured toward. The store appeared clean and organized on the surface, but the atmosphere inside was thick with lethargy and tension. Every interaction between Derek and the customers seemed to chip away at the patience of those waiting in line. Shaq could sense that something was off, and the unease seemed to emanate from the cashier manning the counter. Derek, dressed in the red and orange uniform of Big Chicken, looked utterly uninterested in his job. His hair was unkempt, and the deep hollows under his eyes hinted at either a lack of sleep or sheer apathy. Leaning lazily against the counter, he scrolled through his phone as if it were the only thing that mattered. Every time he raised his head, it was accompanied by a frown, as if dealing with customers was an unbearable burden. Shaq quietly observed as a middle-aged man stepped forward, his tone polite, but tinged with frustration. "I ordered the honey-glazed chicken over 15 minutes ago. Why isn't it ready yet?" Derek didn't bother to look up. He lazily pointed toward the kitchen where orders were piled up and mumbled, "Probably not done yet. Just wait a bit longer." "At the very least. Could you check for me?" the man asked, attempting to keep his composure. Derek shrugged, sighed dramatically, and called out to the kitchen without even turning his head. "Hey, is that honey chicken ready? Hurry up." A voice from the back replied, "Still frying? 5 more minutes." Derek turned back to the customer, shrugged again, and said, 5 minutes. No apology, no smile. The man shook his head in disappointment, muttered something under his breath, and returned to his seat. The atmosphere in the store grew heavier. The customer's patience was wearing thin, and the worst part was that Derek seemed completely oblivious or simply didn't care. Next up was a young couple. The woman smiled politely as she asked, "Hi, could I exchange this for a non-spicy chicken? I accidentally ordered the wrong one." Without even looking up from his phone, Derek replied curtly, "No exchanges. Order the right thing next time." The woman blinked in disbelief and turned to her boyfriend for support. The boyfriend, clearly reaching his limit, tapped the counter lightly with his hand. "Hey, is it really necessary to be that rude? This is our first time here." Derek raised an eyebrow, his tone dripping with defiance. "It's the policy. If you don't like it, go somewhere else." For a moment, the air seemed to freeze. Several customers in line began shaking their heads, some murmuring to each other in irritation. Shaq noticed all of this, but what angered him most was Derek's blatant disrespect and lack of professionalism, behavior that completely misrepresented Big Chicken's brand. Amid Derek's chaos, Shaq's attention shifted to another employee in the kitchen. This was Todd, a middle-aged man with a calm demeanor and bright, energetic eyes. Todd's uniform was neat, and he was busy frying chicken and preparing orders. Yet every time a co-worker needed help, Todd would pause to lend a hand. Shaq noticed that Todd always wore a smile while working, something Derek sorely lacked. Despite the heat of the kitchen and the demanding workload, Todd maintained a positive attitude, even cracking jokes with his fellow employees. His lightheartedness seemed to lift the spirits of those around him, creating a stark contrast to the tension at the front counter. This stark difference highlighted a clear division between the two employees, one dedicated and thoughtful, the other apathetic and abrasive. Shaq knew he couldn't just sit and watch any longer. Rising from his seat, he walked over to the counter, pretending to be a customer in need of assistance. With a warm smile, he asked Derek, "Excuse me, could you tell me if this chicken comes with any sauce?" Derek barely glanced up, lazily pointing to the menu on the wall. "Just look up there. It's all on the board." Taking a deep breath to keep his cool, Shaq thanked Derek and walked away. But in his mind, a plan was forming. He needed a clearer picture, not just from a few minutes of observation, but a deeper understanding of the underlying issues at the store. To make a real difference, Shaq knew he'd have to address more than just Derek's attitude. Back at his seat, Shaq took a sip of water, his gaze fixed on the counter as he thought to himself, "Someone like Derek isn't just a personal issue. This is the result of poor management, and I'm going to make sure that's addressed." With determination in his eyes, Shaq began mentally preparing for his next steps in uncovering the truth behind the store's struggles. Shaq sat back at the table, silently observing the scene unfolding at the counter. The atmosphere in the store grew increasingly stifling as the crowd of customers swelled, but Derek, cold and indifferent, seemed either oblivious to the tension or simply didn't care. His face was a wall of apathy, showing no effort or goodwill toward his job. Each time a customer made a request, Derek responded with curt, dismissive answers that only added to their growing impatience. A young man near the counter, after waiting over 15 minutes for his turn, finally lost his composure. He raised his voice, tinged with frustration. "Can you move a little faster? I didn't come here to waste my whole day just ordering food." Derek slowly lifted his head, emotionless. His eyes briefly glanced at the man before snapping back with a sharp, defiant tone. "If you don't like it, you can leave." Derek's response was like throwing gasoline on a fire. A few other customers began murmuring among themselves, their dissatisfaction becoming more evident. A woman nearby voiced her frustration. "This is unbelievable. I've been waiting nearly 20 minutes, and this is how you talk to your customers? Is this how you treat people here?" Derek, remained motionless, arms crossed over the counter, shrugging as if he couldn't care less. "I'm just doing my job. If you don't like it, go complain to someone else." Shaq overheard this exchange, and a wave of frustration washed over him. He realized Derek wasn't just lacking basic customer service skills, he was blatantly shirking his responsibilities. Worse still, none of the other employees stepped in to address the situation. Their silence only compounded the chaos brewing in the store. By now, The line had grown longer, and the scattered complaints were turning into widespread discontent. A few customers, tired of waiting and fed up with the lack of apologies or explanations, left angrily. The glass door swung open and shut repeatedly, accompanied by muttered complaints. "I'd rather go somewhere else. How does someone like him even have a job here?" Derek seemed impervious to the mounting tension. He continued scrolling through his phone, occasionally looking up to half-heartedly answer a question, but his lethargy and disinterest never wavered. Shaq couldn't help but notice that Derek's behavior wasn't just an individual issue. It reflected a deeper problem with the branch's work culture. The management had clearly failed to identify and address such unacceptable attitudes. After observing long enough, Shaq decided to intervene. Rising from his seat, he approached Derek with a calm demeanor, masking the disappointment in his eyes. With a faint smile, "Excuse me, can I ask about the honey-glazed chicken? Does it come with fries?" Derek lifted his head and gave Shaq a tired once-over. Instead of answering, he lazily pointed toward the menu board behind him and said, "Just read it. It's all up there." Taking a deep breath to compose himself, Shaq thanked Derek and returned to his table. Inside, though, his frustration was bubbling over. This wasn't the standard of service Big Chicken stood for, and it was certainly not the kind of experience he wanted customers to walk away with. As Derek continued his negative behavior, Shaq's eyes drifted toward the kitchen where Todd was hard at work. Unlike Derek, Todd exuded positivity. Despite the hectic pace in the kitchen, Todd maintained a cheerful demeanor and seemed genuinely dedicated to his work. Shaq noticed that Todd not only handled his responsibilities efficiently, but also went out of his way to assist his colleagues whenever needed. Each time an order was ready, Todd double-checked it before sending it out, ensuring there were no mistakes. The contrast between the two employees couldn't have been starker. Todd embodied the ideal of a committed team member, while Derek was the personification of everything Shaq was striving to root out. Shaq returned to his seat, reflecting on what he had just witnessed. He couldn't help but wonder, how has Derek lasted this long in the team? Is this just a problem with him, or is it a sign of a bigger issue in the way this branch is managed? That question kept repeating in Shaq's mind, making it clear that the problem at this location extended far beyond Derek's individual attitude. There was something deeper, something systemic, and if he didn't act quickly, it could undermine the values and reputation Big Chicken had worked so hard to build. Shaq knew the next steps wouldn't be easy, but he had made up his mind. The truth had to come to light, and the solution had to start immediately. Shaq sat back at the table, sipping a glass of water, his eyes drawn toward the kitchen area where Todd, a middle-aged employee, was diligently working. The contrast between Todd and Derek was like light and shadow in a painting. While Derek manned the counter with an air of cold indifference, Todd was busy preparing orders, his face wearing a gentle, constant smile. There was something about Todd that made Shaq want to step closer, to learn more. Shaq stood up and walked toward the kitchen, intentionally choosing a spot where he wouldn't draw too much attention. As Todd noticed Shaq approaching, he lifted his head and greeted him with a warm smile, his eyes radiating kindness. "Hello there. Is there something I can help you with?" Todd asked. Shaq scratched his head, his tone deliberately hesitant to match his rugged appearance. I don't have much money, but I'm really hungry. Is there anything here that's like the cheapest thing I could afford?" Todd looked at Shaq, a flicker of thought passing through his eyes. But in just a moment, his smile widened. "Hang tight. Let me see what I can do for you." Todd turned back to the kitchen, swiftly preparing a hot plate of chicken and a small portion of fries. Despite juggling several tasks at once, he moved with a calm efficiency, never showing a hint of irritation. After a few minutes, Todd placed the meal on the counter and said softly, "You don't have to pay. We're here to serve people. Enjoy your meal." Shaq held the warm meal in his hands, feeling a sense of comfort, not just from the food, but from Todd's attitude. It was a stark contrast to the treatment he'd received from Derek earlier. Todd wasn't just doing his job, he was pouring his heart and dedication into it, something Shaq deeply admired and hoped Big Chicken could embody. Shaq decided to strike up a conversation. "How long have you been working here?" Todd wiped his hands on his apron, his face lighting up with pride. "I've been here almost 10 years since this location first opened. I love this job. Love the customers. It's a great feeling to see people leave happy with a good meal." Shaq nodded, but he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more behind Todd's smile. He pressed gently. "You seem really busy. Is everything okay at work?" Todd's smile faltered for just a second. He glanced around to make sure no one else was listening before answering honestly. "It's been a lot tougher lately. We're short-staffed, so everyone's doing double, sometimes triple the work. That's not the problem for me, though." Todd paused, as if carefully weighing his words. Finally, he sighed and continued. "What's hard is some of the newer employees don't really care about the job or the customers. It makes things more challenging for the rest of us. I do my best, but sometimes it's exhausting." Todd's words gave Shaq plenty to think about. Todd wasn't complaining about the workload or his personal struggles. What troubled him was how employees like Derek were impacting the customer experience and the overall team spirit. Todd was exactly the kind of person any business owner would want to keep, not just for his skills, but for his passion. Shaq asked, "Why haven't you gone for a promotion? You seem like you'd be great at keeping everything running smoothly." Todd chuckled, but there was a hint of bitterness in his laughter. "I've been nominated a few times, but upper management keeps saying the budget doesn't allow for it. Honestly, whether I get promoted or not doesn't matter to me as long as I can keep doing the work I love. But to tell you the truth, there are times when I feel overlooked." Those words cut deep for Shaq. Here was Todd, a dedicated and passionate worker, being undervalued, while Derek, a careless employee with a bad attitude, was standing at the counter representing the face of Big Chicken. Todd placed a hand on Shaq's shoulder and said sincerely, "Anyway, thanks for stopping by. As long as customers are happy, I feel like it's all worth it. If you need anything else, just let me know." Shaq smiled, thanked Todd, and returned to his table, still holding the warm plate of chicken. As he sat down, he couldn't stop thinking about the stark contrast between the two employees he'd encountered. Todd was a shining light in the chaos of this branch, but that light seemed to be dimmed by the shadows cast by a flawed management system. Shaq realized that Todd was the reason he needed to act, and act quickly, not just to fix the problems at this particular location, but to protect the values Big Chicken stood for and ensure that employees like Todd never felt forgotten or unappreciated. Shaq stepped out of the store, feeling the scorching Phoenix afternoon heat hitting his face like a wave. In his hand was an old, worn-out canvas bag, but in his mind, he was carrying a burden as heavy as a boulder. The encounter with Todd and what he had witnessed from Derek left Shaq with a whirlwind of emotions. Disappointment, anger, and a faint glimmer of hope sparked by Todd's kindness. Walking slowly toward his car, Shaq glanced back at the Big Chicken storefront. From the outside, it looked like perfection. Shiny signage, a clean space, and the tantalizing aroma of fried chicken wafting through the air. But behind those doors lay a different reality. A cashier with a disengaged attitude, a team exhausted from lack of support, and a management system that had failed to address the root issues. Shaq couldn't shake the image of Derek's expression, an empty stare mixed with an air of arrogance. Derek wasn't just an unskilled employee. He was a symbol of the deteriorating work culture Shaq had worked so hard to cultivate. What gnawed at Shaq even more was the deeper question. How did someone like Derek manage to remain part of the team? How is Derek still employed here? Where have the managers been all this time? Shaq wondered. He realized Derek wasn't the only problem. The indifference and lack of accountability from the management team had created an environment where behaviors like Derek's could thrive. Instead of actively overseeing and supporting the team, they had likely chosen to ignore the issues, prioritizing revenue over customer experience. Yet Shaq couldn't ignore the warmth Todd had brought to the situation. Todd's actions weren't motivated by obligation or a desire for recognition. They came from a genuine love for his work and a desire to bring joy to customers. Todd embodied the type of employee every business dreams of. But what saddened Shaq was that Todd's efforts had gone unnoticed and unappreciated. Shaq replayed Todd's voice in his mind as he spoke about being passed over for a promotion. Promotion doesn't matter much to me, but sometimes I do feel overlooked. Those words pierced Shaq like a knife. How could he allow such a dedicated employee to feel forgotten? Meanwhile, individuals like Derek openly undermined the brand image Shaq had poured his heart into building. Shaq slid into the driver's seat, but didn't start the car right away. He sat there, hands resting on the steering wheel, staring at the Big Chicken building. Everything seemed clearer than ever. The issue wasn't just Derek or Todd. It was an entire system that had failed to uphold the values Big Chicken was supposed to represent. The management system has lost its connection with the employees, Shaq thought to himself. Values like kindness, dedication, and accountability had faded under the weight of rigid policies and a profit-over-people mindset. Before starting the car, Shaq took a deep breath and looked at himself in the rearview mirror. Though dressed in worn-out clothes, he knew he couldn't continue playing the role of an undercover homeless man. He needed to return, but this time, as Shaquille O'Neal, the leader and ultimate decision-maker. Shaq understood that change had to start with him, not just to fix what was happening at this location, but to ensure the entire Big Chicken system would never repeat the same mistakes. Todd deserves better. The customers deserve better. And Big Chicken, the brand I've poured my heart into, deserves better. Shaq thought resolutely. The car's wheels slowly rolled out of the parking lot, but Shaq's mind was already racing with the plans he would set in motion in the coming days. He knew he couldn't act on emotions alone. He needed data, more insights, and most importantly, direct conversations with the people who had let the situation spiral out of control. Shaq would return, but this time, he would bring change that no one could ignore. Returning to Big Chicken's headquarters, Shaq carried with him a deep sense of determination. For the first time in years, he felt the need to immerse himself in the company's operations, not through polished reports or awkward board meetings, but by confronting the raw, unvarnished truth of how his company was truly being run. Shaq entered his private office, closed the door, and sat down at his desk. In front of him was his computer, loaded with all the personnel files from the branches, including the Phoenix location. He began scrolling through the records, focusing on the names tied to what he had witnessed. Having just witnessed the stark realities of his Phoenix location through the eyes of a disguised customer, Shaq wasted no time. He immediately delved into the personnel files of Derek and Todd, beginning with Derek's record. What he found was a disheartening string of customer complaints, ranging from concise notes like rude attitude and unprofessional behavior to more detailed feedback such as, "The cashier didn't even make eye contact while speaking to me. I felt completely disrespected." Some reports went even further, stating that Derek had argued with customers or deliberately delayed service, driving them away in utter frustration. Over and over, the words, "No disciplinary action recorded," appeared in connection with Derek's incidents, making Shaq frown in disbelief. How has someone like this been allowed to keep working without consequences? Shaq wondered. As he delved deeper, Shaq discovered that Derek's direct manager at the Phoenix branch had ignored numerous warnings. An email from the customer service department to the manager highlighted customer dissatisfaction and recommended retraining or disciplinary measures. Yet there was no record indicating that anything had been done. The manager's negligence not only enabled Derek to remain, but also allowed his negative behavior to persist unchecked. Next, Shaq turned to Todd's file. In stark contrast to Derek, Todd's record was filled with glowing reviews. Customer comments brought a genuine smile to Shaq's face. "Todd is the best employee I've ever met at Big Chicken. He's always welcoming and eager to help." Another read, "Todd didn't just help me pick my order, he made my day better. He genuinely loves his job." But as Shaq dug deeper, a bitter feeling crept in. Todd had been recommended for promotion at least 3 times in the past 5 years, but each time the requests were denied due to budget constraints. Shaq also found that Todd hadn't received a single bonus, despite consistently ranking among the top performers. This realization filled Shaq with profound frustration. How can such a dedicated employee go unrecognized? How can someone like him be left to work under a system with such misplaced priorities? Shaq didn't stop there. He decided to investigate the management system at the Phoenix branch. Reports from the regional manager painted an even bleaker picture. Severe understaffing forcing some employees to juggle multiple roles at once, ineffective training programs leaving new employees ill-equipped to handle customer interactions, and a glaring lack of transparency in the evaluation process, allowing outstanding employees like Todd to go unnoticed, while problematic staff like Derek avoided accountability. These issues not only undermined service quality, but also eroded the morale of dedicated employees. Todd was the clearest example. Despite giving his all, he felt abandoned by a system that failed to see his worth. The more Shaq researched, the more he realized the problem wasn't just about Derek or Todd. The real issue lay in a management structure that had lost its sense of responsibility and empathy. Mid-level managers at the Phoenix branch had ignored warning signs and prioritized short-term revenue over building a stable and motivated workforce. Shaq couldn't help but ask himself, Is this problem isolated to Phoenix, or has it spread to other locations as well? He knew that one poorly run store could tarnish the reputation he had worked so hard to build. Leaning back in his chair, Shaq stared at the computer screen. His frustration began to morph into resolve. He knew he couldn't let this continue. Todd deserved recognition. Derek needed to change or leave. And above all, Big Chicken's management system needed an overhaul to prevent any other branch from repeating these mistakes. Shaq began drafting a list of actions he needed to take. Each line, each bullet point, added fuel to his determination. Conduct a thorough investigation of conditions at other branches. Call an emergency meeting with the regional management team. Revamp the employee evaluation system to ensure workers like Todd are celebrated, not overlooked. Rebuild the company culture, starting with emphasizing the value of its people. When the list was complete, Shaq took a deep breath. A part of him felt heartbroken that these flaws had arisen under his leadership, but the rest of him burned with determination. I didn't build Big Chicken just to turn a profit, he thought. I built it to be a place where employees and customers alike could feel happy. And I'm going to get it back on track. Shaq glanced at the clock. Tomorrow, he would return to the Phoenix branch, not as an anonymous observer, but as himself, a leader ready to face every challenge to uphold the values of the brand he had built. 1 week later, on a sunny morning in Phoenix, the Big Chicken store opened its doors to the first customers of the day. The sizzling sound of frying chicken from the kitchen blended with the tantalizing aroma that filled the air. Todd, as usual, stood in the kitchen area, working while greeting customers with a warm smile. Derek, maintaining his aloof demeanor, leaned against the counter, his eyes glued to his phone. The glass door swung open, and this time it wasn't just another customer walking in. It was Shaquille O'Neal himself. With his towering frame and commanding presence, Shaq didn't need to say a word. His mere appearance brought an immediate hush over the entire store. All eyes, both staff and customers, were fixed on him. Derek instantly put away his phone, his face turning pale as he realized who had just entered. Todd, standing behind the kitchen counter, looked at Shaq with a mix of surprise and slight apprehension, but quickly composed himself, nodding an acknowledgement as he would for any customer. Shaq didn't say anything at first. He simply offered a faint smile and approached the counter, his eyes scanning every corner of the store. No one dared to speak until Shaq broke the silence. I want to see all staff here right now. Everyone, gather around. Shaq's words weren't loud, but the weight behind them echoed through the room. Todd hurried to call the staff from the kitchen, while Derek, trying to mask his unease, fidgeted nervously. Once all the employees were assembled, Shaq stood tall, his gaze sweeping over each person. His presence alone seemed to freeze the air. After a few moments of silence to command their attention, Shaq began speaking in a deep, steady voice. Last week, I visited this store. Not as Shaquille O'Neal, but as an ordinary customer. I came here to understand what's really happening, and what I saw left me disappointed. Shaq paused, his eyes locking on to Derek. The younger man dropped his gaze to the floor, avoiding eye contact. Big Chicken was built not just to serve great food. We are here to bring joy, satisfaction, and above all, respect to our customers. But what I witnessed last week did not reflect those values. Shaq turned, facing Derek directly. His voice grew firmer. Derek, your attitude toward customers last week was unacceptable. I saw how you ignored people who needed help. I heard how you spoke to customers with disrespect. And let me be clear. There is no place for that behavior at Big Chicken. Derek said nothing, his head hanging low. Shaq continued, his tone serious but no longer accusatory. I'm not here to fire you, but let me make this clear. If you're not willing to change your attitude and genuinely work with respect, this will no longer be the place for you. Consider this your final opportunity to prove you deserve this job. Shaq then turned his attention to Todd, his expression softening. Todd stood calmly, quietly, observing, though it was evident he was just as curious about what would happen next. Shaq offered a faint smile. Todd, last week I saw how you worked. I saw your dedication, your kindness, and how you treated every customer like family. You're exactly the kind of person I want Big Chicken to represent. And today I want to acknowledge that your hard work hasn't gone unnoticed. Shaq turned back to the rest of the staff and announced, starting today, Todd will be the assistant manager of this branch. He has earned this recognition and the position he has worked tirelessly for over the past 10 years. Todd's eyes widened in surprise, his expression a mix of shock and gratitude. He couldn't find the words to respond, but his warm smile and the light in his eyes said it all. The other staff, except Derek, broke into applause, congratulating Todd on his well-deserved promotion. Shaq looked around at the team, his voice now a blend of firmness and inspiration. Big Chicken isn't about me, Derek, or even Todd. It's about all of us. It's about how we work together, how we treat our customers, and how we uphold the values of this brand. Remember, no one here is unimportant, but at the same time, no one is allowed to undermine what we've built. Taking a step forward, Shaq's voice grew stronger. Today marks a new beginning. From here on, we will change. Not just at this branch, but across the entire system. What I saw here last week will not happen anywhere else. As Shaq finished, the store fell silent, but it was a silence filled with reflection. Every employee, even Derek, felt the gravity of his words. Shaq scanned the room one last time, nodding slightly before delivering his final message. Doing your job well isn't hard. What's hard is doing it with heart. But if you're willing, I'll always be here to support you. With that, Shaq exited the store, leaving behind a team that had just experienced a profound wake-up call, a much-needed jolt, to spark real change. After announcing Todd as the new assistant manager, Shaq stood still for a few seconds, waiting for the applause to fade. The atmosphere in the room shifted noticeably. Joy and admiration for Todd spread. But with it came a sense of unease and nervousness among other employees, especially Derek. Shaq began walking slowly toward Derek, his gaze sharp, yet not overbearing. This wasn't just a direct conversation, it was a lesson for everyone in the room. Shaq stopped directly in front of Derek, towering over him, but his voice was calm, clear enough for everyone to hear. Derek, your attitude at work doesn't just disappoint customers, it impacts the entire team here. When you wear this uniform, you're not just representing yourself, you're representing Big Chicken and the values we are trying to build. Derek kept his head down, but Shaq wouldn't let him avoid accountability. I've seen how you've treated customers, with impatience, disrespect, and a complete disregard for what we expect from our team members. But I also understand that sometimes people need a chance to change. Shaq paused, locking eyes with Derek, his tone growing firmer. I'm giving you that chance. Not because you deserve it, but because I believe anyone can change if they truly want to. However, if you don't prove that you can do better, then this will no longer be the place for you. Derek didn't respond, but the confusion and anxiety on his face were clear. He couldn't escape Shaq's piercing gaze or the pressure that filled the room. Shaq continued, "Your effort doesn't just depend on you. It also depends on your willingness to learn from those around you. Todd will be your guide. He's not just the new assistant manager of this store. He's the example I expect you to follow." Derek gave a faint nod, but Shaq knew that a simple nod wasn't a final answer. Real change had to come from action, not words. Shaq wanted to believe that Derek could change, but he was also prepared for the possibility that Derek might not or wouldn't want to. That's why he placed responsibility in Todd's hands, a person Shaq trusted to not only excel in management, but also inspire and mentor those like Derek. Turning to the entire team, Shaq said, "Today isn't just a warning for Derek, it's a reminder for all of us. Big Chicken is built on respect, kindness, and teamwork. If anyone here feels that they can't align with these values, I won't stop you from leaving. But if you choose to stay, I expect all of us to work with heart, for our customers and for each other." Shaq stepped toward Todd, placing a hand on his shoulder and smiling. "Todd, I know this new role won't be easy, especially given the current state of the store, but I trust that with your dedication and experience, you'll not only improve this place, but also give people like Derek the chance to become better. I'll always be here to support you if you need it." Todd, surprised by the level of trust Shaq placed in him, maintained a humble demeanor. "Thank you, Shaq. I'll do my best, not just for the store, but for this team. I believe everyone can change if they're given the right opportunity and guidance." Shaq smiled with satisfaction. Todd's response wasn't just words, it was a confirmation that Shaq's decision had been the right one. Before ending the meeting, Shaq announced several major changes for the store. 1. Increased staffing. Shaq committed to bringing in more employees to reduce the workload and pressure on the current team. 2. Improved training. A new training program focused on communication and customer service skills would be implemented, ensuring that all employees, especially those like Derek, understood their roles and how to perform better. 3. Reward system. High-performing employees would be recognized and rewarded appropriately, ensuring that those like Todd wouldn't feel overlooked. Shaq emphasized, these changes aren't just about fixing problems, they're about building a stronger foundation for the future of Big Chicken. I want everyone here to feel like they are a vital part of this brand. After Shaq left, the atmosphere in the store seemed to shift. Todd was congratulated by the team, and he immediately began engaging with Derek, trying to build a bridge with him. Derek, though still visibly anxious, seemed to realize that he couldn't continue as he had been. He was now facing pressure not just from Todd, but also from the eyes of his colleagues. Colleagues who had witnessed Shaq clearly outline the difference between a dedicated employee and someone merely going through the motions. As Shaq got into his car and drove away, he didn't feel entirely relieved, but he knew he had laid the groundwork for change. He understood this was only the first step in a long journey. A thought flashed in his mind. If Derek can change, anyone can, but only if we're willing to lead them with both firmness and compassion. Gripping the steering wheel tightly, Shaq felt more determined than ever, not just to transform this branch, but to reform the entire Big Chicken system. This wasn't just about running a business, it was about building people. Leaving the Phoenix store, Shaquille O'Neal didn't allow himself to linger in disappointment for long. He knew that what had happened at this branch wasn't an isolated issue. It was a symptom of a system that needed reform at its core. Back at headquarters, Shaq immediately got to work, implementing a series of reforms he believed would not only address the issues in Phoenix, but also reshape the entire work culture at Big Chicken. Shaq and the senior management team worked tirelessly for days to design a new training program, focusing on communication skills, work attitudes, and customer experience. These weren't going to be the usual rushed orientation sessions, but instead, a comprehensive series of practical courses. The program included simulated scenarios to teach employees how to handle common challenges, from dealing with difficult customers to managing busy shifts with efficiency and grace. Throughout the program, Shaq emphasized the importance of kindness and respect. Good food is only a small part of the customer experience, he stated. What they remember most is how we make them feel. A smile, a thank you, or just genuine sincerity. These things cost nothing but hold immeasurable value. Shaq personally attended some of the training sessions, sharing real-life lessons from his own experiences. He openly recounted the story from Phoenix, using Derek as an example of what needed to change while highlighting Todd as a role model every employee should aspire to emulate. Shaq also understood that creating a better workplace required giving people a voice. He decided to introduce an anonymous feedback system across the Big Chicken network, allowing employees and customers to share their thoughts, compliments, or complaints without fear of judgment. For employees, this system provided a safe way to express challenges, internal conflicts, or management issues. For customers, it became a platform where their voices could be heard, ensuring that poor experiences like the one with Derek would never be ignored again. Shaq dedicated a team to monitor and address these feedback submissions. Every comment would be reviewed, categorized, and responded to within 48 hours. He reminded the management team, "Listening is not optional. It's our responsibility. If we don't listen, how can we expect loyalty from our customers or our employees?" One of Shaq's most significant reforms was the introduction of an employee recognition program. He knew that individuals like Todd deserved more than just praise. They needed tangible acknowledgement. The program included 1. Financial rewards. High-performing employees, or those receiving consistently positive customer feedback, would earn quarterly bonuses. 2. Big Chicken Hero Program. Each month, an award would be given to employees who went above and beyond in their duties. Winners would be publicly recognized in their store, receive a special reward directly from Shaq, and have their stories shared on Big Chicken's official website. In the program's first month, Todd received the inaugural Big Chicken Hero Award for his dedication at the Phoenix branch. A short video showcasing Todd's interactions with customers and his mentoring of Derek went viral, inspiring employees across the entire company. Back in Phoenix, Shaq closely monitored the branch's progress under Todd's guidance. Derek began showing small signs of change. Initially, he begrudgingly followed Todd's instructions, but over time, Todd's patience and persistence started to influence him. One busy evening, Derek took the initiative to apologize to a customer for a delay and even offered to help them choose an alternative dish. Todd noticed this and later told Derek, "Well done, Derek. That's the attitude we need here." That's exactly what we need. Just a little effort, and things get better for everyone. Derek didn't respond verbally, but a faint smile appeared on his face. A small change, but a meaningful one. Shaq understood that these changes were just the beginning. There would be more challenges ahead, new problems to solve, and mistakes to learn from. But he believed that with the reforms now in place, Big Chicken could not only fix its mistakes, but also grow stronger as a company. Before concluding a management meeting, Shaq looked around the room with determined eyes. "We're not a perfect company, but we can be a company that strives to improve, and every change starts here with us. Let's lead with heart, for our customers, our employees, and ourselves." The room erupted in applause, but Shaq didn't stop there. He knew that to build a sustainable work culture, he needed to keep leading by example, keep listening, and never forget why he started Big Chicken in the first place. Not just to sell great chicken, but to bring value to people's lives. Over time, the atmosphere at the Big Chicken store in Phoenix began to shift noticeably. Under Todd's dedicated guidance, Derek, once a negative and indifferent employee, started to change. In the early days, Derek's progress was slow, almost reluctant. But thanks to Todd's patience and understanding approach, Derek gradually came to recognize the responsibility and value of the work he was doing. Todd understood that Derek wasn't inherently a bad person. He was simply someone lost in a system that failed to provide the guidance or motivation he needed. Instead of reprimanding or criticizing, Todd chose to lead with practical guidance and simple lessons drawn from his own experiences. One morning, Todd smiled as he approached Derek, who was visibly flustered while assisting an elderly customer. "Derek, try this," Todd said. "Before you respond, take 3 seconds to smile and look directly at the customer. It'll make them feel more at ease, and I promise you the conversation will go much smoother." Derek hesitated but decided to follow Todd's advice. This time, instead of a curt reply, he offered a faint smile and said, "Let me check that order for you, ma'am. Please give me just a moment." The customer's demeanor shifted instantly. She smiled back and nodded, thanking Derek for his politeness. As she walked away, Todd gently patted Derek on the shoulder. "See? Not as hard as you thought, right?" Derek nodded, a hint of pride flickering in his eyes. For the first time, he realized that small actions could make a big difference. Todd didn't stop at teaching Derek how to interact with customers. He also helped him see the importance of contributing to the team's overall spirit. During a busy shift, Derek noticed Todd helping a colleague carry boxes of supplies into the stockroom. Without hesitation, Derek stepped in and said, "Let me give you a hand." Todd said nothing at the moment, only nodding as they worked side by side. Once they finished, Todd turned to Derek and said, "That's exactly what I want to see from you. A strong team is built when everyone's willing to support each other. You did well." Derek began to understand that improvement wasn't just about how he interacted with customers, but also about how he worked with his teammates. His transformation wasn't superficial. It was genuine and rooted in a newfound appreciation for the value of teamwork. Gradually, Derek started to find meaning in a job he had once viewed as a burden. Derek's positive changes not only improved his personal image, but also began to influence the entire team at the Phoenix store. Some coworkers who had previously felt unmotivated or disillusioned took notice of Derek's transformation. If someone like Derek could change, they thought, perhaps they could too. Derek, once regarded by his colleagues as the weak link, became someone they could rely on. One busy evening when orders were piling up, Derek stepped into the kitchen to help Todd fry chicken. A younger co-worker, Jason, saw this and remarked to Todd, "I didn't think Derek would ever step into the kitchen. I thought he was just a front counter guy." Todd chuckled and replied, "That's the power of choosing to change, Jason. Everyone has potential. Sometimes they just need an opportunity to see it for themselves." Derek's transformation wasn't just a lesson for him, but also an inspiration for the entire team. The positive energy spread, and the store's performance began to improve, not just in terms of service speed, but also in customer satisfaction. One day, Shaq made another unexpected visit to the Phoenix store. This time, he wasn't in disguise. Dressed casually, his face lit up with a radiant smile. He was immediately greeted by Derek, who gave him an authentic, warm smile and said, "Welcome back, Mr. Shaq. How can I help you today?" Shaq paused, studying Derek for a moment. He could see that the cold, indifferent demeanor Derek once had was gone. In its place was a confident, responsible individual who now showed genuine respect for his work and the people around him. Shaq smiled, nodded, and said, "Derek, I'm proud of you. You've shown that anyone can change if they truly want to. Keep it up, okay?" Derek bowed his head slightly in gratitude, his heart swelling with appreciation. He wasn't changing just to impress Shaq or Todd. He was doing it because he had finally realized the significance of being a positive force within a larger team. As Derek continued his journey of self-improvement, he received more and more positive feedback from both customers and coworkers. Todd, who had tirelessly supported him, could now take pride in knowing that he had helped someone transform not just in their job, but in their outlook on life. For Derek, this journey wasn't just about changing his attitude. It was about growth, learning that respect and responsibility could turn any job into something meaningful. And under Todd's guidance, Derek wasn't just an employee anymore. He was becoming a vital part of a larger positive change at Big Chicken. Shaquille O'Neal stood in his office, his eyes fixed on the view outside the window. The bustling city below was alive with traffic and motion. But in his mind, vivid images of the Phoenix store played out clearly. The recent journey had been more than a simple field visit. It was a profound lesson, one Shaq knew he would carry with him forever. Derek, the quintessential antagonist in this story, had proven that even those who seem incapable of change still have the potential for redemption. But what weighed more heavily on Shaq's mind was the systemic flaws within Big Chicken's management that had allowed such issues to persist. From the negligence of regional managers to the lack of proper training programs and recognition for employees like Todd, these factors had created an environment ripe for negativity to thrive. Shaq stepped into the conference room where Big Chicken's senior management team was waiting. He scanned their faces, people he had entrusted with his vision, yet now he realized that trust alone wasn't enough. It needed to be reinforced with accountability and action. Shaq began the meeting with a deep, commanding tone. "We've done well with expansion. The numbers speak for themselves, but let me be clear. I didn't start Big Chicken just to make money. I started it to create a place where both employees and customers feel respected and valued. The room fell silent. Shaq continued, his gaze sharp. What I witnessed in Phoenix was a wake-up call for all of us. An exceptional employee like Todd was nearly overlooked, while someone as toxic as Derek was allowed to remain unchecked for far too long. That cannot continue. Big Chicken is not just a restaurant, it's a part of me and all of you. If we can't build a culture rooted in kindness and respect, then we've failed. Shaq laid out a detailed plan to ensure the issues at Phoenix would not be repeated. 1. Management. Restructuring. Shaq decided to increase oversight across branches, requiring regional managers to spend more time working directly at stores. He also introduced a new policy mandating regular meetings between managers and employees to address concerns and gather feedback. 2. Investing in company culture. Shaq announced a company-wide initiative called Big Heart, Big Change. This campaign would focus not only on enhancing customer experience, but also on encouraging employees to practice kindness and unity in their daily work. 3. Recognizing silent efforts. A new online platform was launched to highlight and celebrate outstanding employees across all locations. Stories like Todd's would be shared widely, not just to inspire, but to reinforce the idea that every contribution matters. Shaq didn't forget Derek's story either. He recounted Derek's transformation to the entire management team, not just to underscore the problem, but to emphasize that change is always possible with the right guidance. Derek showed us that even those we think are beyond saving can turn things around if we don't give up on them. It's not easy, but if Todd could see potential in Shaq, couldn't help but ask himself, is this problem isolated to Phoenix or has it spread to other locations as well? He knew that one poorly run store could tarnish the reputation he had worked so hard to build. Leaning back in his chair, Shaq stared at the computer screen. His frustration began to morph into resolve. He knew he couldn't let this continue. Todd deserved recognition, Derek needed to change or leave, and above all, Big Chicken's management system needed an overhaul to prevent any other branch from repeating these mistakes. Shaq began drafting a list of actions he needed to take. Each line, each bullet point, added fuel to his determination. Conduct a thorough investigation of conditions at other branches. Call an emergency meeting with the regional management team. Revamp the employee evaluation system to ensure workers like Todd are celebrated, not overlooked. Rebuild the company culture, starting with emphasizing the value of its people. When the list was complete, Shaq took a deep breath. A part of him felt heartbroken that these flaws had arisen under his leadership, but the rest of him burned with determination. I didn't build Big Chicken just to turn a profit, he thought. I built it to be a place where employees and customers alike could feel happy, and I'm going to get it back on track. Shaq glanced at the clock. Tomorrow, he would return to the Phoenix branch, not as an anonymous observer, but as himself, a leader ready to face every challenge to uphold the values of the brand he had built. 1 week later, on a sunny morning in Phoenix, the Big Chicken store opened its doors to the first customers of the day. The sizzling sound of frying chicken from the kitchen blended with the tantalizing aroma that filled the air. Todd, as usual, stood in the kitchen area, working while greeting customers with a warm smile. Derek, maintaining his aloof demeanor, leaned against the counter, his eyes glued to his phone. The glass door swung open, and this time, it wasn't just another customer walking in. It was Shaquille O'Neal himself. With his towering frame and commanding presence, Shaq didn't need to say a word. His mere appearance brought an immediate hush over the entire store. All eyes, both staff and customers, were fixed on him. Derek instantly put away his phone, his face turning pale as he realized who had just entered. Todd, standing behind the kitchen counter, looked at Shaq with a mix of surprise and slight apprehension, but quickly composed himself, nodding an acknowledgement as he would for any customer. Shaq didn't say anything at first. He simply offered a faint smile and approached the counter, his eyes scanning every corner of the store. No one dared to speak until Shaq broke the silence. "I want to see all staff here right now. Everyone, gather around." Shaq's words weren't loud, but the weight behind them echoed through the room. Todd hurried to call the staff from the kitchen, while Derek, trying to mask his unease, fidgeted nervously. Once all the employees were assembled, Shaq stood tall, his gaze sweeping over each person. His presence alone seemed to freeze the air. After a few moments of silence to command their attention, Shaq began speaking in a deep, steady voice. "Last week I visited this store, not as Shaquille O'Neal, but as an ordinary customer. I came here to understand what's really happening, and what I saw left me disappointed." Shaq paused, his eyes locking onto Derek. The younger man dropped his gaze to the floor, avoiding eye contact. "Big Chicken was built not just to serve great food. We are here to bring joy, satisfaction, and above all, respect to our customers. But what I witnessed last week did not reflect those values." Shaq turned, facing Derek directly. His voice grew firmer. "Derek, your attitude toward customers last week was unacceptable. I saw how you ignored people who needed help. I heard how you spoke to customers with disrespect. And let me be clear, there is no place for that behavior at Big Chicken." Derek said nothing, his head hanging low. Shaq continued, his tone serious but no longer accusatory. "I'm not here to fire you, but let me make this clear. If you're not willing to change your attitude and genuinely work with respect, this will no longer be the place for you. Consider this your final opportunity to prove you deserve this job." Shaq then turned his attention to Todd, his expression softening. Todd stood calmly, quietly observing, though it was evident he was just as curious about what would happen next. Shaq offered a faint smile. "Todd, last week I saw how you worked. I saw your dedication, your kindness, and how you treated every customer like family. You're exactly the kind of person I want Big Chicken to represent, and today I want to acknowledge that your hard work hasn't gone unnoticed." Shaq turned back to the rest of the staff and announced, "Starting today, Todd will be the assistant manager of this branch. He has earned this recognition and the position he has worked tirelessly for over the past 10 years. Todd's eyes widened in surprise, his expression a mix of shock and gratitude. He couldn't find the words to respond, but his warm smile and the light in his eyes said it all. The other staff, except Derek, broke into applause, congratulating Todd on his well-deserved promotion. Shaq looked around at the team, his voice now a blend of firmness and inspiration. "Big Chicken isn't about me, Derek, or even Todd. It's about all of us. It's about how we work together, how we treat our customers, and how we uphold the values of this brand. Remember, no one here is unimportant, but at the same time, no one is allowed to undermine what we've built." Taking a step forward, Shaq's voice grew stronger. Today marks a new beginning. From here on, we will change. Not just at this branch, but across the entire system. What I saw here last week will not happen anywhere else. As Shaq finished, the store fell silent. But it was a silence filled with reflection. Every employee, even Derek, felt the gravity of his words. Shaq scanned the room one last time, nodding slightly before delivering his final message. Doing your job well isn't hard. What's hard is doing it with heart. But if you're willing, I'll always be here to support you. With that, Shaq exited the store, leaving behind a team that had just experienced a profound wake-up call, a much-needed jolt